Hello, it's the 12th of November, Security Weekly News episode 166. It's the Security Weekly News wrap-up show for the week of 7 November 2021. Elon buys my motorcycle, Lyceum, Buzzword Security, PS5s, Puny Code, Palo Alto, Small Biz, all that and more on the Security Weekly News wrap-up show.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right, I'm Doug White, and this is Security Weekly News wrap-up show. All the shows that are fit to print. On Application Security Weekly number 173, John and Mike had Dan McKinney from the Developer Relations at Cloudsmith on the show. The segment was about SBOM, which is a term that just sort of started to exist. I never heard that term before last year, but it basically means the software bill of materials. Which, of course, means you have to describe all the stuff that goes into your applications. And they were talking about that and what it will do to your application in order to have to be able to do that. So it's kind of like when they started telling, like food manufacturers, they had to list all the ingredients on the products, and they were like, oh, that's not going to be good. They did talk about cloud-native tooling, GPG keys, signing commits, and a lot of other dev topics that give you some... If you're a developer and you haven't sort of tuned into this stuff in a while, like me, it was interesting to see the modern insight on the issues of development. Definitely worth watching. If you don't know, Dan is a Cloudsmith YouTube narrator and designer. So if you've ever watched any of those Cloudsmith videos on YouTube, you've probably heard his voice and seen his content. In the second segment, Excel gains support for JavaScript data types and functions, arbitrary code execution in the Linux kernel TICP. TICP. More malware in NPM packages, threat models, and OTP, two-factor authentication, bots, and NIST security labels. On Business Security Weekly number 239, Ben, Jason, and Matt talk with Sarah Griffith, the CISO at Euronet Worldwide, and Suresh Balasubramanian, who is the CMO at Qualys, about the value of in-person cyber events. And a lot of other things about conference presentations and all these, live event kind of thing. Now, you know me, I like Zoom meetings and I like staying in my submarine full time, but I do like to go to live cons and see everyone. So they were talking a lot about that. And cons, just aren't the same virtually. I mean, yeah, virtual DEF CON still has cool presentations and stuff. Virtual, B-sides and stuff have cool presentations and so forth. But it's just not the same as going and hanging around or crashing parties or all that good fun stuff that you get to do at these various cons, or seeing Jack Daniels in his swan costume in the swimming pool. And, and I have to make my own drinks. In the second segment, the first 100 days in a CISO's life, the biggest mistakes and biggest quick wins, the hybrid work woes, FOMO is real, employees feel disconnected, breaking down cybersecurity, hiring problems, and more. On Enterprise Security Weekly 249, Adrian Cady and Tyler Shields had Angela Marafino, program manager at Microsoft in the Security Compliance, Identity, and Management Organization of Experiences. Angela is really super cool if you don't know them. The segment is about how Angela got into this industry and views on some challenges like imposter syndrome and things like that. Also some stuff about jazz. So pretty cool, very interesting segment. In the second segment, Nick Leghorn, the director of application security at the New York Times, was on the show. Nick was on to talk about risk-based security programs and what works and what doesn't work. Definitely lessons learned from someone with a lot of experience in this realm. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 94, Flea, Jeff, Kat Valentine, and Priya Chaudhry had on Alan Alford, the CISO/CTO at TrustMap. they had a general discussion about how to do security compliance and how to do it better. The focus was on compliance, obviously, and how that should be first in this model. So, as always, they have a lot of discussion around compliance, and they had a lot of other things that were pretty fun on there. On Security Weekly News number 165, Jason talked about Zebra 2104 APT acting as an access broker for rival malware gangs and APTs in general. So, a nice little discussion there. On Paul's Security Weekly number 718, Ladrina Shunray, the principal security advocate at Cybereason, and Martin Groten, the director, the coordinator at Coalition Against Stalkerware, were the first guests. This whole segment was about, if you didn't catch it, was about how technology may put your personal safety at risk. I mean, we've all probably either known somebody or been stalked by somebody at some point in time, and the modern age has really facilitated that. The minute you want to find out something about people, you can find out where they are by looking at their pages or their tweets and so on. And I mean, I remember, racking up anonymous death threats on the earliest form of the internet, but it was like, Oz compared to the Thunderdome we're operating in right now. I think all those death threats that I got came from a guy named Marco who lived in his mom's basement and got angry because I said Picard was a better captain than Kirk. Anyway, this particular segment was about key logging, screen sharing, captures, cyber stalking, some recent court cases, and so forth. So a very interesting segment, pretty much for anyone that's interested in that. On the second segment, Sachin Mahajan, a developer intern at InGuardians, was on to talk about new UAV, which is drones, regulations and restrictions. In particular, talking about a loophole that allows you to build a sub 250 gram quadcopter where those regulations may or may not apply, and how Sachin built one that can be flown for fun. So if your idea of fun is war drones, check this out. This is a fun segment. And in the third segment, the news. My thread of the week is going to be buzzwords. I saw this art. I usually get motivated to do these threads. Somebody asked me how I got these topics, and I was like, well, I usually just start looking at news articles and see something that makes me mad, which doesn't take very long. And I saw this art, and nothing against the article at all. I saw an article about zero trust on Wednesday night on Security Weekly, and it was like 5 myths of zero trust attached to the show notes if you want to read it. And it reminded me of how much I hate marketing. I mean, it's AI enabled and ML enhanced. Tastes great, but still less filling. Not at all like a bucket of warm cat drool. No chance. I mean, I know we need someone to tell us what is hot and what is not. And 4 out of 5 doctors recommend healthy menthol cool cigarettes for all your respiratory woes. And I don't know what's in them, but I know I can't quit smoking them. But, good old marketing. And I'm looking at you, C-Suite. I get so frustrated when somebody asks me to advise them about security or firewalling or any of the kind of thing that I often advise people about. And, we research the matter, we put together a proposal, and then someone in the meeting, you do the presentation, somebody in the meeting says, that does have enhanced zero trust with the cool new car smell and machine learning, right? And you just want to like run and just jump out the window right then. Because you're sitting there in this meeting going, okay, none of this has anything to do with that. But those are the buzzwords of the day. And then they say, well, Doug, I don't know about your attitude, but product Y over here has enhanced, it has the new enhanced zero trust with the cool new car smell. I just want to make sure your product is providing that same level of service. And, smug marketing rep is sitting over there in the corner with free T-shirts and hats going, ours has machine learning. It's, maybe it's not quite that ridiculous, but it's pretty damn close. I mean, I've literally seen decisions be made because I saw a salesperson tell them that something that doesn't even exist or wasn't even reasonable was in their product. And I was immediately asked, because you have that too, right? And your product has a 2-meter thermal exhaust port on it, doesn't it? I mean, we need to have one of those because I saw it mentioned a bunch of times, and apparently they're all the rage. I mean, then this happens in politics too, right? They use some buzzword like blort, because I don't want to do politics, but some buzzword like blort, and they say it over and over on News X, and everyone starts saying, we love blort, or we hate blort, and they start asking the school board, we aren't going to have any blort taught in our classes now, are we? And somebody says, well, what is blort? And the person is just like, it's blort, and blort is bad. And I'm waiting for your position on the Blort issue, Senator. It's anti-American, practically communism in action. And half the people in the room are saying, what the frack is Blort? And the other ones are texting their staffers going, why the frack are we behind on this goddamn Blort issue? I better have a full Blort position paper on my desk by the time I get back from the bar. Our heads will roll. 3 days later, the Senate's passing some bill, the anti-American, anti-Blort bill, and calling for a full-scale investigation of Blort and anyone who ever blorted anywhere, especially if they ever blorted in Russia. I mean, the same thing went on with AI and ML. I mean, we all know that, right? You've heard all of us ranting about it, about, people that don't know the difference in AI and ML, talking about how their product is AI and ML enhanced, and then you say, is it? And they go, oh, yes, it is. It says so right here on the box. I mean, tastes great, less filling. I mean, all of a sudden, if the product wasn't AI enhanced, well, we don't purchase anything that's not got AI enhancement. I mean, I've seen rules like that. That fleet of corporate vehicles we just ordered from Ford, they are AI enhanced, right? I mean, well, they better be, or we'll have to cancel the entire order because we now have a policy saying we have to have only AI enhanced product. Now, don't go asking them what AI or ML is or how it might affect the product or how it's different from, say, 5 million lines of COBOL code, because they won't answer you. And if you make the boss look bad, well, heads will roll. So we, and by we I mean you, are going to have to be better about ensuring that our security apps and such don't get bogged down in this sort of nonsense, and that we evaluate them effectively and push back when our C-suite people start asking these kind of questions, which don't make any sense. I mean, I know that's a lot to ask from one short article about 5 zero trust myths, but zero trust is another one. I've been asked that repeatedly, like, zero trust, I even had somebody say this product would be zero trust, right? And you're like, what? Sure, why not? I mean, I'm always asking a lot of you, though, right? I really want to hold you to a higher standard and ensure that you don't blort. Well, at least that you don't blort in public spaces in front of my kids. Well, most of the time. And now the news. Well, Rutro, it's not a revelation, I guess, that gaming platforms are not that secure. I mean, no one really takes them seriously, and pretty much despite evidence to the contrary, they always kind of had that magic Apple Unix status of not being targets. I mean, I know that's not true, but I mean, that's the way people sort of perceive that stuff. It's a gaming platform. Who targets that? I'm like, every hacker ever. I mean, you see that stuff going on all the time. Well, here's some evidence for you. PlayStation 5 had 2 breaches and that were not disclosed to Sony in advance. So on the 7th of November, Failoverflow posted a tweet which shows firmware symmetric root keys. So those are the keys, that are pretty important. You don't really want to lose control of those. Another tweet later said that they got all the PS5 root keys and that they can all be obtained from software, and that even a per console root key can be obtained if you look hard enough, which is just like saying, hey, hack it. A second post from Andy Nguyen tweeted that he was able to access the debug settings menu, which, even though there weren't a lot of details there, it implies that there's some kind of kernel exploit that was being used to get to the debug settings menu. And these symmetric root keys are used to encrypt other keys. They're used for communications. They're used, for all sorts of things. And anybody getting hold of them is a major issue. Now, these issues, of course, can lead then to pirated software, malware being embedded on systems, jailbroken PS5 machines. I mean, some of that stuff, of course, depending on your point of view, is good. Some people would like to have jailbroken, machine. Now, considering you can't get a PS5, I guess I don't really need to worry about it, but if Sony wants to send me one, I could spike this story, but you're going to have to include a Fanatec wheel. I can't resist these stories because I like PunyCode attacks so much. I own hothorse.com with all those slashes through the O's. Yeah, I mean, I love that stuff. I mean, this one basically, though, it says that there's a new email campaign that targets Microsoft 365 users, so, obviously. And, of course, now that you have to beat the scanner, so the scanner's going to, basically either delete the mail altogether, put something on the front of it that says suspicious or external or spam or whatever when it arrives at the front door. Well, that creates a big issue because you got to get around that. So the campaign, which was discovered by Avanon, has been called One Font, because basically they set a font to 1 point, which means it's so small that you can't probably see it on your monitor, and it allows them to hide things inside the message. Now, that wouldn't hide it from a scanner necessarily, which was my immediate sort of thought when I started reading this article. I was like, well, how would that hide it? But the attack allows them to hide links in an email and get past the scanner. The links are also being hidden in cascading style sheets, which are often attached. And because so many of these things have become natural language filters, more buzzword stuff, and that was one of those things that every spam filter has to have, right? A natural language filter. It may not be able to see these, or it may exclude them because they're part of cascading style sheets or they're part of something else. There was a previous campaign called Zero Font, which used, 0-point font sizes and made them basically invisible, even though they were still there. So the emails themselves are just typical phishing attacks. So they get through, they get you to enter your 365 credentials when you click a link because they basically hid something in that got through the filter. The font tag is how they were doing it. So that font tag itself, which basically means that maybe even if you used a 100-point font, it wouldn't matter if the filter is ignoring it. And the natural language filter, like safe links, apparently did not detect this particular approach. And I think it's even more dangerous because we spend a lot of time telling people that this new system is going to protect them. So maybe it's legit. Think about my earlier rant about buzzwords. Because I've never seen a product yet that goes, we're sort of effective. We kind of get the job done some of the time because the marketing always says, we will stop it. Okay, well, we're going to have to teach people to be just as paranoid and cynical as me if we really want to stop this, or we're going to be in trouble. Hackers apparently stayed hidden for 9 months on a Queensland water supplier server at Sunwater, which is an Australian-owned water supplier that operates 19 major dams, 80 pumping stations, and 1,600 miles of pipelines. Honestly, that is how I would do these things. Defacing somebody's website is satisfying and fun, I guess, I've heard. And, changing all the file names to bite me is amusing for a few minutes, I've heard. But at least to me, being able to get in and stay hidden is more of a Zen kind of hacking challenge. If I create an account like Colonel Opsis instead of a username like OrgyDaddy69, which, my kernel name is going to be a lot harder to spot, I've heard. But anyway, this breach occurred between August 2020 and May 2021, and all the inbound attacks arrived on a web server, imagine that, which was used to store customer information. Now, these hackers aren't much fun, since they didn't actually do much, apparently, except use some custom malware to drive visitor traffic to an online video platform. But it really does illustrate how difficult it is to find these things at scale and how easy it is to sit here in my comfy chair with my sexy clothes and my massive production staff bowing to my every whim. But in practice, it's really difficult when you've got 10,000 employees, 3% turnover per year, hundreds of servers, who knows? And it's basically like, you're trying to ride herd on 25 separate servers or even just one while the dam is leaking, email is down, somebody's sucking up all the bandwidth, streaming 3D kangaroo porn. And, the CEO asked me to drop by her house later, wink, wink, to install a new WAP out by the pool. That actually happened. I was like, what, you want me to do what? Why are you winking? And they're like, well, you can bill it to the company, that kind of thing. I was like, that's not why I thought you were winking, but okay. Yeah. So we got to work on that infrastructure stuff. A massive zero-day was found in Palo Alto. This is CVE 3064 and has a 9.8 out of 10 on the severity meter. The vulnerability is in the Global Protect firewall, which will allow remote code execution on multiple versions of the OS from 8.1 to 8.1.17, whether it's physical or virtual firewall device. The exploit is going to allow the attacker to get a root shell on the target system and pretty much, then do whatever they want. And as you might guess, controlling the firewall means you can pretty much touch everything internally in a trusted way. And, say like the previous story. And so somebody might even set up a firewall rule called Palo Alto Updater or something that allows someone's home IP into the network anytime, I've heard. Anyway, this is patched. But, a lot of people don't patch their firewalls very often, and taking down your firewall and patching it is always a scary thing. But Palo Alto did advise that the number of affected devices still showing around the world is 10,000 at least, based on a Shodan scan. So, do that. There is a video of the exploit being run in the article, so you should definitely patch up your firewalls. The United States House of Representatives passed the Small Business and Development Center Cyber Training Act of 2021, which, considering that small business is always a big talking point with politicians, but rarely a big funding point, small business is a huge target for attacks. And small business usually has almost no budget for cyber experts, SIMs, SOCs, or even a copy of Dan's Guardian, or even an old copy of PC Computing Magazine or something. After Dan's Guardian went commercial, they charged for their service and so on. Not that I'm begrudging them making money, but a lot of small business just doesn't have budget for this. So it's good to see that maybe some support is being sent that way. The first thing they did was establish a cyber counseling CERT program at the Small Business Development Centers, which would allow help with cyber strategy and security needs, and that can help them actually get reimbursed for for certification costs. So I don't know if you've ever looked at certification costs, but sending people to a week of training at pick any one of the famous really awesome training centers is not cheap. They also did approve a Small Business Administration Cyber Awareness Act, which would require the Small Business Administration, which is part of the federal government, to generate a report about cyber capabilities in small business and inform Congress of breaches that occurred there. Probably this helps with supply chain too, because a lot of these small businesses are providing products to larger businesses, and guess who's getting targeted? They said that estimate 50% of all attacks occur against small businesses. It is good to see something. I wish it was more. But at least it's something. I mean, I used to work for this grant-funded thing that sent consultants out to schools to help with tech and security stuff and paid real money instead of the usual rate that you get from schools and people like that is basically nothing. And I mean, you get that call from your old English teacher that says, hey, I guess I'm now in charge of something called the Cisco Networking Grant and Equipment Configuration Project for the school district. Could you maybe give me a quick rundown on how to set this stuff up? I've got this thing called a router here, and I need to connect it to something called the interweb. We got a grant for the equipment, but that was all. And only me and little Jimmy from the AV Club are down here to set the whole thing up. Note that actually did happen. Lyceum is an APT that has been around since at least 2017 and had previously mostly targeted oil and gas assets in the Middle East and government organizations sometimes. The group is apparently expanding their reach based on the prevailing adversarial counterintelligence teams, Accenture's cyber defense group, Kaspersky, and Clear Skies all reporting on this and their recent campaigns. The group is suspected to operate out of Iran, which would, make them hostile, at least to the United States. The study basically identified 20 new domains associated with command and control infrastructure and demonstrated that Lyceum has been infiltrating networks which belong to ISPs and governments in a much larger area than they previously operated. Kaspersky reported them using a new piece of malware that's written in C++ that was based on their original malware, which they called DanBot. The Accenture and Prevalian report said that they discovered DNS tunneling going on, which, of course, is a non-command and control operation approach using that DNS path, which is usually open in the firewall because people want to get, DNS messages in and out. And I mean, that's hard to find and hard to monitor because you got so many DNS requests going on. It seems to be that they're looking for opportunities to use the ISPs as a means to conduct supply chain style island hopping attack to penetrate customers of the ISPs. The report says the level of sophistication they now have shows that Lyceum has some government backing most likely, and that the U.S. should expect to see this group targeting the United States soon due to poor relations between Iran and the U.S. So that's not really news. The term Lyceum, if you don't know, it usually either refers to a performance venue for lectures, sounds exciting, or maybe a group sponsoring public programs. Not sure who named it, but it's an interesting name. Yeah. All right. And finally, well, the Twitter poll told him to sell the stock. So Elon did sell $5 billion worth of Tesla stock this week. The report said the sale was not pre-planned, and after 58% of the voters on Twitter told him to sell 10% of his shares, well, he sold some. Now, I don't know what that represents, but now before you start thinking that you can manipulate billionaires with Twitter polls, some of this was likely part of a series of planned stock option trades, which were set to expire in 2022. So if he didn't execute them, they were going to expire. And there's no telling what was really going on. Like a lot of things, well, Elon often plays for effect. So, like, say I need to sell my motorcycle. And I do, really, so if you want a motorcycle. But I go on Twitter and I say, if enough people post nude pics of Larry, I will sell my motorcycle. Well, then I just created a bunch of drama. I get a headline on CNN about how these nude photos are now proliferating. Nude photos of Larry are proliferating on the internet. And I still, maybe I get a buyer for my motorcycle, but who knows? And that's the news wrap-up for the week of 7 November 2021. See you next week on Security Weekly News. Elon, you can buy my motorcycle. It won't even put a dent in your $5 billion. I'll sell it for $100,000, say.